the Great Loop Radio podcast, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today, we're continuing our story of our Great Loop adventure. And this is a series we've been doing with some of our Gold Loopers where they join us and tell us about their boat and all the things about their Great Loop. So today we will be joined by Dave and Karen, and they will share their stories. But before we bring them into the conversation, I want to take a moment, as always, to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Curtis Stokes and Associates, Great Loop Yacht Sales, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And with that out of the way, I'd like to officially welcome Dave and Karen Rattay to Great Loop Radio. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear a little bit about your loop. But Karen, first, I want to start with, you're in the middle of some articles that you've written for our Great Loop Link magazine. Last month, you brought us up the Lake Champlain route, which was fabulous. And coming out tomorrow, actually, if you're listening to this on the day it's launched, the July 1st issue of the Great Loop Link is going to have another article from Karen. So what are you telling us about this time?
This is on the Rideau.
Yeah, and the Rideau is, of course, one of the historic canals of Canada. And it's really a place that's been getting just raves from loopers in the past few years. I think it's just become a more popular route. And I know, Karen, both the Lake Champlain route and the Rideau are some of your favorite places, and you're doing a great job of walking members through that. So if you're not yet an AGLCA member and you enjoy our podcasts and want to support loopers in the association, definitely consider joining us. You'll have access to the Great Loop Link. And as I said, Karen had a fabulous article in the June issue and another one coming up for the July issue. But we're here today to really talk about your Great Loop, and we can see that you're aboard your boat, Sea Level. So let's start. Tell us a little bit about Sea Level, Dave, if you would.
Yeah, she's a Maine Cat, Maine Cat used to make sail cats for quite a long time. Then they dabbled in the park cat world, like many other sail cat manufacturers did. And they made 9 of them, and we happen to be number 9 of 9. I think it's 5 of 9 is up. 6 of 9 is actually out on the loop right now, and it's
Oysterland.
Yep, and they're out and about. And then there's another one for sale actually in the market. So they come and go, but it's a beautiful boat. The great thing about the Maine Cat is low stress cruiser, so it's a low masthead height or air draft, about 15 feet. It's an 18-foot beam, so it's not as wide as most of the other ones are. 3.5-foot draft, about 50 feet long. So just perfect to do what Karen was writing about, going up the various canals, Chambly and all that, and Rideau, etc. So just beautiful for the loop. And
you said the length overall for yours is about 50 feet?
It's about 50 feet, yeah. It's 47 on the hull, but you had a few more feet for the dinghy and for the anchor and that kind of stuff.
And so with an 18-foot beam, it's a pretty spacious boat. So, but you're right, kind of low profile, low air clearance, overhead clearance for the bridges and things like that. What else? I guess because not that many were made is one of the reasons we don't see a lot of them on the loop. But what else about it makes it the perfect looping boat? Tell us a little bit about the livability, things like that.
Yeah, that's great part of it. So we're called a Downey Style Express Cruiser. So that means we're kind of a single level living. And so you come straight in the back swim platform right into the fairly large cockpit, full 18-foot beam cockpit with about 10 feet in the back where you can spend a lot of outdoor time, which we do. You've got a great front deck. And in fact, Karen will tell you about what we did on the Trent Severn.
Yeah, it's got a big front deck, and I like it. Also has the full walk around, easy walk around for me, since I'm the one running up doing the lines and stuff.
Right.
I like having that. But the front deck is nice and roomy, and we have hosted movies up there, outdoor movies, where we had 6 or 7 couples all sitting on our front deck watching a movie.
Like tiered seating.
So
wow, fun.
It's got great outdoor space, but it's also just really comfy and roomy inside as well.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about the engines.
So it's a Volvo Penta D3 220s, so very fuel efficient. We're kind of narrow hulls and long hauls, which makes us very fuel efficient catamaran. You don't have to have a very large engine, which means that in itself is fuel efficient. So we go pretty quickly. We go over 20 knots and can cruise comfortably with very good gas mileage at 6, 7, 8 knots, that kind of thing, or anything between all the way up to 20.
We get
about 2.5 miles a gallon at 7 knots, and we can get over a mile a gallon at 15, 16, 17 knots.
Nice. Very nice. So some people here, and yours is not a particularly beamy cat at 18 feet. But some people, shy away from even looking at cats for the loop because they think they're going to have trouble finding slips. And even people with beamier cats, tell me that really is not the case. You actually usually end up with a T-head, which is kind of a preferred spot. But tell me how that went on the loop. Was 18 too wide for some standard slips, and was that a detriment for you?
So that worked out perfectly for us because of the, like you said, great availability of T-heads and face docks and things like that. We did go in slips, which is nice for an 18-foot, but I wouldn't let that daunt anybody, even if you were up in the 22, 24s, because of the T-heads, et cetera, or you can anchor and other things. But ultimately worked out fine. Only a couple of places could we not get into that we wanted to. I mean, really a couple out of 150. So that's not so bad. Really good percentages there.
Yeah, I when I make reservations and they say I always ask if it's a T-head or face stock, and if it's a slip, I always make sure I ask them what the width is, because every now and then someone tries to put us in an 18-foot wide slip, and we really need
That's rough.
20 foot. Yeah. So, but if we have 20 feet or more in a slip, and a lot of marinas have that, so we really didn't have any problems at all.
And to be clear, I think up to about 20 foot can get you sail through like the Chambly and the other ones, but anything over about 20, then you're into the Welland, which is perfectly fine. A lot of great things to go through that way too if you go Ontario to Erie via the Welland.
Right. Yeah, well, and at your air clearance, you could probably do the Western Erie as well.
This boat literally can go everywhere that the loop goes, without exception, and that's rare to be able to say for every boat.
And all we do is flip the antennas down at the most. I mean, we don't have to take anything up. Yeah,
especially one that's 50-foot length overall. It's unusual to have that kind of low profile to get under those bridges. So
exactly,
great information. Too bad there's not a whole lot more of them built.
Yes.
But let's go ahead and talk specifically about your loop. Karen, this was you writing this, but you called yourself Covidials. Tell us about that.
Well, we were in that I think big group of people that were sitting at home an awful lot during that first COVID summer. Mm-hmm. And it just prompted reassessment of life and where we were going and what we were doing. And Dave stumbled across the loop during all his YouTube watching. We suddenly had plenty of time to do, and it just kind of clicked that this was what we wanted to do. And given we were at a point in life where we had no kids on the payroll, no grandkids yet, no elderly relatives, and we were in good health, it's like this seemed like an opportunity we just couldn't pass up. So, and everything just fell into place so easily that also was kind of our sign that this was the right thing.
Yeah. Well, so once you decided this was something you wanted to do, did you have boating experience prior to this?
Well, I kind of had an ace in the hole where I spent 34 years in the Navy and have deployed 13 times, hundreds of thousands of miles, literally. And I've been itching to get on the water. And Karen actually was open to living on a boat from the moment we met, or not met, moment we got married, really. Because I met her years before. And as such, it was kind of an easy transition for me. Karen she's a sailor herself. Her dad built a sailboat, and she learned to sail when she was younger, etc. So she's always been near the water and loved it. So it wasn't hard for her either. For this concept of getting on the water. It just had to be now the right time, right place, right circumstances, and we had that 3 years ago. Worked out.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I had extensive boating experience in the last 20 years, but as I said, as a kid and young adult, I'd done some cruising on a sailboat, and So I felt comfortable with that concept, but I still had a learning curve.
Yeah. Well, thank you
And I
for
did
your
too.
service. Yeah, thank you for
Oh,
your service, first of all.
thank
But
you.
once you decided, it was time to make this leap and live aboard and do the loop, how long did it take to find the boat? Because we know that there were so many people looking during COVID, and that, that kind of
Yeah.
COVID market still exists today. So how did it go looking for a boat? Did you know you wanted a Maine Cat?
So great question. I didn't even know what a Maine Cat was at that
Mhm.
point that we started. We knew a lot of boats, monohulls in particular, but it was a process of going through, not only going to marinas and looking at books, etc. And then we finally got serious. It was about getting the right buyer's broker. The first one we had was a great guy, but just didn't quite hit what we wanted. Eventually moved to Steve Russell, who helped us find a park at. Once we knew we wanted to move from a monohull to a park at due to stability, et cetera, or livability, et cetera. So anyways, there was a process of about almost a year to get to a boat.
Yeah, we decided, well, I was actually listening to you. We decided,
but I was looking before that.
Yeah, you've been looking. We really decided to do the loop in August. And by January, we were down in Florida actively looking, and we moved aboard in April. So it was, I think, fairly quick.
So that was April of 21
20,
or 2020 when you bought the boat?
21. 21 when
Okay.
we purchased the boat.
Okay. And then you decided not to start the loop right away. And part of that was because the US Canadian border was still closed. And obviously, based on your articles, that was a highlight for you. So waiting for that to open. But you kind of described that as kind of fortuitous in a way, because you were able to get used to living aboard in the boat. So tell us about kind of that first year or so before you really started the loop.
Yeah, so we bought the boat down in Florida, and then we brought it back up to the Chesapeake Bay. Norfolk is semi-home to us, just we lived here on and off for a while. And once we decided not to do the loop, we spent the summer cruising the Chesapeake, and it gave us that time to just learn how we work together, develop our own routines, so that the cruising aspect, the technical part, became a lot easier. So once we were then started the loop the following spring, we didn't have to worry. That was more automatic, and we were able to just enjoy the trip. And I would encourage people to certainly take, if you don't already are comfortable with, especially if you have a new boat, take that time, whether it's months or a year or whatever, because it really, I think, enhanced our loop.
Well, and we had great friends off Inconceivable, and they purchased a Ranger tug. They had it nearby where they were, and they would go to the boat when they could on weekends or long, for a week or so. So they got used to getting underway for multiple days. So you don't have to start cruising right away. You can obtain your boat and then, go back and forth, etc., like they did. And in our case, we started full-time cruising right away. So there's multiple ways to do this, of course.
Yeah. Well, and I love that suggestion, though, that getting used to the lifestyle and used to doing this together. The fact that you did that kind of ahead of starting the loop allowed you to enjoy the trip more. And I talked to so many loopers, and I put myself in this category, that, it takes a good 2 or 3 months to really kind of find that groove of being on the move, of living aboard, of working together. And I feel like we transitioned pretty smoothly. And even then it took me a few months to really just kind of find my groove, where every day didn't feel like so far outside my comfort zone. There's going to be days a little bit outside your comfort zone anyway, but I call it, once I hit my groove, it was the good kind of out of your comfort zone instead of the stressful kind. So I love that you took that time to do that first. And once you then transitioned and did officially start the loop, I like to ask people about their cruising preferences, because so much of looping has to do with, your style of choosing to do the trip, how many miles per day, marinas or anchorages, how fast do you travel, that kind of thing. So tell us about your cruising style, your preferences.
I do primarily the voyage planning, and I get from Karen some of her parameters on what she'd like to do or see or where to go, etc. And then I start looking at the charts and the guides. We have pretty much every guide you can imagine, and I recommend pretty much every one of them to you, and then joining things like Waterway Guide, etc. But we've got a lot of the books as well as the electronic stuff. So I started looking at all that and about how to get from point A to B, and so we kind of look about 30 to 50 miles. Sometimes it's less, especially when you're up in Canada. We did 10 to 15 max
Yeah.
most of the time, because there's just so many awesome places to go to, and you could stay at walls or in parks, marinas. So anyway, so that's kind of the broad brush of 30 to 50, sometimes 10 to 15. And when we would go, we wouldn't want to go every single day. I prefer maybe 2 or 3 days in a row and then spend a couple of days at the next place, or try to look for anchor places, how not to be on the water on the weekends, and maybe at a really beautiful town, which are plenty on the loop that you can select, and then have kind of quick transits in between on the weekdays.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up doing more marinas probably than we ideally would have. You know, we have a dog that we're traveling with, and she's a reluctant user of the turf up on the bow. So we couldn't be at anchor too many days in a row. But so that's why we ended up with a lot more marinas.
Mm-hmm. So having a pet aboard does certainly influence your marina versus anchorage decision for many. It also influences the dinghy or no dinghy decision for people who are looking to anchor a lot. Do you have a dinghy aboard sea level?
We do, and it worked great. And we would bring even our buddy boat folks along too sometimes, just make it more fun, you know, when you can do things with others, as well as more convenient for them as well. I would make note too, when it comes to the voyage planning, we did attend one of the rendezvous, the Norfolk Rendezvous, and found it to be exceptional in general, but specifically for me and the voyage planning. One of the things that's gone through at these rendezvous are the routes, and then knowledge. We brief in these, and they give you suggested itineraries. And I used that all along the way, and it was golden the whole way, along with the written guides you can buy at Amazon or something. So anyways, I highly recommend getting to some of these rendezvous so you can get that information.
Yeah, our speakers are absolutely phenomenal. And the next rendezvous is coming up November 6th through 9th in Joe Wheeler State Park in Rogersville, Alabama, a little later than normal because of the lock closures on the Illinois Waterway this year that are already closed and are expected to reopen around October 1st. So we're giving everyone a little bit of time to get there, but we will be doing those route briefings covering from that area on the Tennessee River around the southern half of the loop back to Norfolk. And the 2024 spring rendezvous will be in Norfolk once again. So we know that's a super popular event. So anybody who's watching or listening, it is a members only event. So if you're hoping to attend, you will have to join if you're not already a member. But we also know that it is going to sell out. We've basically kind of outgrown Joe Wheeler State Park, but there is not a more suitable facility that can hold more people really anywhere on the river system. We've searched. So if you are hoping to register for that, we'll be putting details in the August Great Loop link about registration. We know it will sell out fast, and that's why I just want to put a little bit of info out there. We are also having a winter rendezvous this year in Punta Gorda, Florida. So if you can't make the fall rendezvous or can't get into it because it's sold out, much of the content will be repeated in Punta Gorda, and that is partly because we know Joe Wheeler State Park will sell out pretty quickly. So that was a little bit of a tangent, but let's go ahead and take a break and play a message from our sponsors. When we come back, I kind of want to talk a little bit about, reality versus expectations of the trip and some of your highlights. So we'll be back in a moment. Cutterman Marine Services is a vessel relocation and delivery service owned and operated by retired and former members of the U.S. Coast Guard. They have crews ready to exceed your expectations wherever your vessel is located. In addition to relocation and delivery services, they offer a host of other marine services such as new owner training. Check out their website at www.cuttermanllc.com or call 855-65-BOATS. You have a lot invested in your boat. Why would you trust it to someone other than the Cutterman? Cutterman Marine Services. Professional, knowledgeable, capable, experienced. Life is better by the bay. Here in Panama City, Florida, we have deep blue water surrounded by arts and culture. We love our historic neighborhoods, southern coastal cuisine, and the songs and stories of our locals. And we're sure you will, too. If you're traveling along America's Great Loop, drop your anchor at St. Andrews Bay in Panama City and enjoy easy access to waterfront restaurants and shopping, a favorite among loopers. Land or water, you're going to love it here. Visit destinationpanamacity.com and learn more. We're back on Great Loop Radio. My guests today are Karen and Dave Rattay. We are hearing the stories of their Great Loop adventure. So Karen and Dave, was the reality much different than your expectations?
for us, it really wasn't. If anything, the expectations or our reality exceeded our expectations. I think we had done so much reading and YouTubing and
Forum reading.
We've been following the forum for so long that we really felt like we had a pretty good grasp on what the loop was going to be like and what we needed to do. Not that there weren't surprises, but
and maybe that's part of the point, was that pre-preparation, and to so much in a good way is available through the AGLCA folks, that you can really be well prepared for this if you choose to take time to look at it.
I think one of the expectations I had that was really exceeded was the community of loopers and the people. I mean, I really look forward to that part. I'm the extrovert, he's the introvert of us. So I look forward to meeting new people and everything. But just that whole looper community, and when you're loop frogging and seeing people again weeks or months or days later, and that absolutely enhanced the loop, and I think made it far beyond what it looks like on paper. And you can't teach that. That just happens.
Yeah. And since you described Dave as the introvert, I'm going to ask Dave a question on this. The loop is a very social trip, and it really is a community like no other. And a lot of couples do have one extrovert and one introvert. But for some people who are a little bit more introverted, how does that work out? Is it a comfortable scenario when you're meeting new people all the time?
There's occasionally I would put Karen to go, Karen, you can go meet the new person, and I'll be glad to stay back with the dog.
I'll talk to anybody.
Yeah, and of course you tell your story, the same story over and such. I'm more interested in hearing other people's stories and hearing them talk. And but nonetheless, it's the good news is the people that, I really mean this, the people that are on the loop are really our kind of people with the same positive attitude and challenges. We all go through challenges, and then you like to talk about it afterwards, and it's just fun to hear, or fun to have someone listen to my challenge and they go, I did that too, Oh, thanks. Right. Now I no longer feel like the most stupidest guy in the room. So anyways, it's just wonderful people, wonderful time. And sometimes you just don't participate in a good way, and Karen just runs off and does her thing.
Yeah.
Well, and that also gives you each time apart too.
Yeah. Yeah. See, he goes and takes care of the dog, and I hate him back, and I'm talking.
More like I'm working on the boat. So.
No, he's working on the boat.
There you go. That's right. Everyone finds their groove.
That's his groove.
So tell us about some of the highlights. We know you loved Canada, as many do. I also loved Canada. Tell us either what it was about that area, or, share a little bit more about that or some of the other highlights.
Yeah, I think Canada, it was such, with the short distances, you had just plenty of time to see all these little towns, and everybody in the towns was so friendly. And especially along the canals there, they had done such a good job of incorporating that into the town, that you made these vibrant towns along the route. Once as we came north on the Hudson River, one thing we noted since we went straight when everybody else went left to go to the Erie, the towns, you could see they were struggling some more, and so and a little bit sad sometimes seeing what they had been and knowing their history. But then we got up into Canada, and all of a sudden these towns were just fantastic. They focused on the tourism. So that was particularly rewarding.
I like the daily challenge, and sometimes that spending a couple of days in port was convenient, so I could catch up with the daily challenge, like planning the next part. And I think part of what I would tell folks, for one thing, is don't get so wrapped up on you got to do 6,000 miles or 5,000 miles that I can't do it. No, you only have to do, the next day, and you have time to prep if you choose to, and then, or prep maybe a week or a month in advance or something. So I would take some of that, but that was a challenge, and I loved it. That was a highlight, to have these challenges in front of me that I could overcome.
Yeah, definitely a feeling of satisfaction when you're overcoming those challenges on a regular basis, for sure. Speaking of challenges, I know you did have some challenges on the river system, and I think some of that was a mechanical challenge, but also a kind of cruising you hadn't done before. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I'll tell the engine problem. And in short, I had a low engine oil pressure problem, and I had a similar but different cause on the port side on the other my port engine a year earlier. And so it became a little challenging and frustrating to some degree to figure out what it was. But it meant that we had to adjust. And again, part of the challenge, part of the fun is overcoming these challenges. So we did. We had this problem in advance, a problem we had to overcome. We had to figure out how fast we could go. We met new people that we wouldn't have met, and they recently completed their loop. They're Canadians in particular, and it was just, once again, we found the silver lining in that challenge, and it meant new people, new places to go we wouldn't have gone, and we eventually figured it out, and then continued on our way. It was an oil cooler problem that I had to replace.
Yeah, so the rivers for us, because that was the one aspect of cruising that neither of us had ever done, so that part was a little intimidating, but having talked to a lot of fellow loopers along the way who'd already been through the river system, that reassured us some.
Right.
And then once you get through that first couple of locks, and you kind of realize, okay, yeah, we can do this. In reality, the engine problem just kept us cruising no more than about 7 knots, which probably wouldn't have been going much faster anyways. Right. But just having that kind of hanging over you, and just hoping that, okay, it's not going to get any worse, right? And especially on the rivers where boat yards and stuff are a little less accessible. And so but we basically came all the way down from day 2 on the rivers all the way down to Orange Beach before we were able to get it fixed. So.
And that certainly is one of the challenges of the inland rivers, is that there's just not as it's not as easy to get parts, it's not as easy to get services. But I think that probably also, the fact that you had a good year under your belts before you started the loop probably also is what enabled you to kind of keep your cool in that situation and continue on at a slower speed. I think if you're newer to the boat still, that probably would have presented a much bigger challenge. So kudos to you for getting that experience first. What other tips would you have for somebody who's kind of new to this idea or is in the process of planning and getting ready to go?
I think, one, approach it with a positive attitude. Know you're going to have challenges. Know that in some ways is part of I won't say the fun, but part of the reward is overcoming those challenges. It's never going to be perfect. There's something's going to come up. So just be prepared for that and be willing to deal with it. And then always try to find the silver lining, because some of our biggest challenges were what ended up being some of our most memorable, certainly our best stories. But for example, we were in one of the groups where the chute broke down, and we were there for 6 days. But we had a blast we couldn't change the fact that we were there. So, and the people that were there with us we just had a great time and still stay in touch with them. They're some of our good friends.
And for those who follow Facebook, may recall last summer, Wilson showing up. That was Karen did the Wilson, and then our folks with us wanted their own Wilson, so Karen made them a Wilson too. So anyway, so it was good.
So a little bit of the backstory there, because probably everyone is not familiar with what happened there. So why don't you tell us, what caused you to be delayed for 6 days, and day 1 and 2 with Wilson, and how that proceeded?
The big chute is the second to last lock on the Trent Severn. And at about 4 p.m. on a Thursday, a hydraulic pump broke. And we pulled in Friday morning to the Blue Line, thinking we were there early. And the people that were already there said, "Yep, it's down." We're not, And ultimately, when you have 100-and-something-year-old pump or system, it takes a while to find parts. So we were really just sitting there waiting. And there's not really anything right around the chute, so we just kind of made our own fun.
We were stranded.
We were marooned, and there were about 6 or 7 other boats with us. And I think it was, as we were still waiting for more information, we were all at breakfast one day, and someone said something about, we're like castaways, from the movie, and we need a Wilson, and it just kind of went from there. And white ball fenders are perfect for a Wilson. So
much fun. And I remember seeing that on Facebook and being, kudos to you for that good attitude that you talked about. It's, it could be a very stressful situation sitting there pretty much in the middle of nowhere for 6 days or so. but
Yeah.
obviously you made the best of it and had a lot of fun. And I hear that there were locals too who were, offering to drive people for groceries and whatever they needed. So tell us about that.
Yeah, there was one of the local cottagers who, one of the boats that was with us happened to know from a whole different scenario incident they had. And he just came over one day and said, "Hey, I got the truck. Anybody want to go to town?" Because the nearest grocery store was probably 10, 15 miles away. It wasn't close. And he just took 4 of us and we stopped in. He said, "Oh, I'll stop in town. You can go wander down the main street here." And then he took us to the hardware store and anywhere we needed to go pretty much. And just because he could, which was
Right.
just
And
fantastic.
others that offer too like that. So the point is that's not a one-off. That's really more about that's the people. That's the community that you find up there.
Not all the boaters, but even the locals there. They had heard that the chute was broken and people were coming down all the time, and it was really pretty heartwarming.
Yeah. And again, kudos to you for making the best of a challenging situation. But you're right, Dave, that's not a one-off that I hear. There have been similar closures on places like the Erie Canal, and similar things happened where, locals adopted a bunch of loopers for the week or so that they were stuck there. And, kind of really makes a challenging situation nice. And one of the things, we've talked a lot today about the community of loopers. One of the things I say a lot is that, I think loopers are really kind of a self-selecting group of very laid back, solve the problem, make the best of it kind of people. I think someone who's very high strung and gets, completely torn to pieces over something like being delayed like that opts out of this lifestyle pretty quick because it's really just not something they're going to enjoy. But I think that's part of what makes the looper community so special. So any final thoughts for those who might watch this and, kind of be inspired to perhaps get going on their own loop?
I would reiterate with your last question you had, I would reiterate that in order to get started on this, once you've kind of figured out what works for you and what doesn't work for you, especially getting a boat wise, is 1, get involved in the AGLCA so you can start getting information. 2, start working on what boat you might want. But I think the key of that is determining what kind of fits for you uniquely, and then get a good buyer's broker so that they can help you through that, which helped us tremendously. And I think put us in the right boat for Karen and Dave. And then the next step is to take your time making it happen. If you can't, then move forward at your pace that you need to. But if you can take a little extra time to ensure you're prepared to go out, do so. That said, you're never always fully prepared, but there's a ton of people out there ready to help you. And they're either in the next boat or they're a phone call or email away to the home crew. But bottom line is it's a doable do.
Yeah, I would say don't overthink it. At some point, a better is the enemy of good enough. And do your planning and preparation and consider that part of your loop is spending that time in advance. And then that's part of the experience. And then at some point, you just
cast off the line.
There you go.
You'll figure out the rest as you go.
Well, Dave, I know you told us who your buyer's broker was earlier, but I think we had a little blip in the audio. So go ahead and share that again, if you would, for those who are wondering.
That was Steve Russell. In fact, they're
Admiralty Yacht Broker.
Yeah,
Admiralty Yacht Sales. Yep. Yeah. Steve is an AGLCA sponsor, and he specializes in cats. So for those of you who are considering a cat, you can find Steve in our sponsor directory, and he is the guy to go to if you're looking for a catamaran for sure. So always love to give a shout out to our sponsors, and I'm glad you had a good experience with Steve. I would expect nothing less knowing Steve. But both of you, this has been such a pleasure to hear about your loop. And, I really think that this is inspirational for others who might be considering and, deciding, is this something for them? So thank you for sharing the details.
I enjoyed it.
And thank you to everyone who has watched or listened today. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Great Loop Radio podcast. Until then, safe cruising.